We begin, though, in Toronto, where Defence Minister Anita Anand announced Canada is restarting its efforts to retrain Ukrainian troops. Canada has been doing so for years under Operation Unifier, but that work was put on pause when the war broke out. Now, Canadians will be helping get Ukrainian civilians ready to fight. Up to 225 Armed Forces personnel will be deployed to the UK beginning next week. The joint program with the UK aims to train 10,000 Ukrainian recruits in just 4 months. Anita Anand is the Minister of National Defence. We reached her in Toronto. Minister, today's announcement, this program purports to train regular Ukrainians without military experience to be combat ready in 5 weeks. Now, for the Canadian forces, the personnel there, the training is twice that long. Why is 5 weeks good enough in this case?
Well, it's a very good question. I will just say that the Canadian Armed Forces have been training Ukrainian soldiers over the past 7 years. We've trained 33,000 members of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, and so our contribution in today's announcement, sending up to 225 members of our Canadian Armed Forces to train Ukrainian soldiers, is a continuation of efforts that we've been making in training for over 7 years.
Is it always just 5 weeks?
In terms of the duration of the training mission is dependent upon the decisions that are being made, of course, in the UK that is running this multi-allied partnership, and we will continue to be there to train Ukrainian soldiers, to work side by side with our allies in support of Ukraine's sovereignty, but also in support of the rules-based international order, which has kept us all safe since the end of the Second World War.
What I think I hear you saying there is that it's not entirely up to us.
It is very much a collaborative effort. Okay. We are going to be on the ground, Catherine, with training in the area of field craft, in weapons training, in terms of first aid and the law of armed conflict. So there are multiple different types of courses that are going to be run, and Canada's going to be participating across the board.
When it comes to that commitment to training Ukrainian troops, and you talked about the commitment that existed before the war, that was until 2025. This announcement today, it's only an initial deployment of 4 months. Given that we were ready to help out until 2025, why only 4 months?
We are in a time of war, and the situation is very much evolving. Our aid to Ukraine in military context has been extensive. We've committed over $600 million worth of military aid. Most recently, the 39 brand new armored vehicles that are coming off the line at GDLS. And so what I really want to say is that our aid has been comprehensive, and it will continue to represent the way in which we stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine.
I just want to understand, though, we were going to be helping train Ukrainians until 2025. Now we're talking about a 4-month commitment. Is that 2025 off the table now? Where do we stand on that?
Not at all. We announced in January that we were extending and expanding Operation Unifier, and part of that expansion is to ensure that we are there for the Ukrainian Armed Forces. I'm not sure if you're aware, but when we donated the M777s, we also trained Ukrainian Armed Forces members on the use of the M777s. So, in fact, we have continued to train Ukrainian soldiers, and we will continue to do so going forward as opportunities present themselves to do so in a safe and effective manner.
Okay. I'd also like to ask you for an update on an announcement that you made at the end of June, that Canada would work with Latvia and NATO allies to dramatically increase the military presence in that country. I know when you made the announcement, there were a lot of unknowns. One thing Canadians are going to want to know, though, is whether that is going to involve an additional commitment of Canadian troops. Can we say yes or no to that question right now? I know you're not going to give me all the details, Minister, but will there be more Canadians involved in that specific effort?
Yes, there will.
Okay.
And specifically, what we put on the table in a declaration jointly with Latvia is that we would work with our allies as the leader of the Enhanced Forward Presence Battle Group in Latvia, to surge up to brigade level. Yes. And what that means is that every country is one with whom we are consulting to determine their individual capabilities and resources from a personnel standpoint. But from a Canadian perspective, it will involve more troops. We need to ascertain the specifics, and I'd be happy to fill you in when we have those at hand.
And when do you expect there to be a formal plan?
Well, there are at least 10 countries in our Enhanced Forward Presence Battle Group in Latvia. That means that we need to have bilateral conversations with each of those countries to determine what their resources are, what their capabilities are, and then bring that back to determine how we can move to surge to brigade level, as Minister Pabriks and I committed to do when we were at the Madrid summit.
Late June. So I will just ask again, I appreciate that it's a complex effort. By the end of this calendar year, for instance, do you expect Canadians to know what that commitment is? By the end of the month? Like, what are we talking about ballpark?
Well, Catherine, it would be imprudent for me to give you a specific date in advance of completing all of those negotiations and conversations with 10 individual countries, with 10 individual armies, to make sure we have what it takes to surge to brigade level. But the commitment is there, and we are doing the hard work behind the commitment to ensure that it is fulfilled.
Okay, well, obviously that is a dossier that we will continue to follow closely, and we look forward to your update on that, Minister. I do want to ask you about one more issue, though, before we let you go. The threat to employees of Canada's embassy in Kyiv when the war started, particularly those locally engaged employees. I'd like to know, and the audience will know that this has been in the news lately. Did the Five Eyes intelligence group offer any briefings about the risk that Russia might threaten Canadian employees or rather locally engaged employees of the Canadian embassy?
For my part, I can say that the Canadian Armed Forces will continue to support the diplomatic presence in our embassy in Kyiv and throughout the world. That is the role that we play as the Canadian Armed Forces. We are continually monitoring the safety and security of our embassies and will continue to do so. In terms of specific operational and high-level briefings, those, of course, are ones that I can't comment on.
The minister, Minister Joly, was on this program yesterday saying there was no specific threat. So I appreciate that you don't want to get into the technicalities or the specifics of particular briefings, but I guess I'm asking you if you can agree with her. The Globe and Mail's reported that in January there was a specific briefing about this threat. Do you agree with your colleagues that there was no specific Five Eyes briefing about a particular threat?
I will say that I know Global Affairs Canada is offering support, dialogue, briefings to locally engaged employees of the diplomatic presence in Kyiv. And from a Canadian Armed Forces perspective, we will continue to support Global Affairs Canada, and we will continue to ensure, to the best of our ability, the safety and security of embassy staff.
I'm just going to ask you one more time, Minister, because this was public domain, right? I'm asking you about Five Eyes reports in January, but as of February, as the war was beginning, I have in front of me the reports from the BBC, from NPR, where the U.S. was telling the United Nations that there was a Russian kill list. As Canada's Minister of Defence, can you confirm whether Canada was aware of the public record threats that the U.S. was talking about?
Again, Catherine, what I can confirm is that the Canadian Armed Forces takes its role in ensuring the safety and security of diplomats and officials at our embassies around the world, including in Ukraine, extremely seriously, and we will continue to do that as requested by Global Affairs Canada in support of officials across the world, including in Ukraine. So
any suggestion that these locally engaged employees were abandoned is wrong, you're saying?
We were very much in touch with them, including offering briefings and consultations, and of course take the safety and security of all officials very seriously. I had the opportunity to meet with some of them when I was in Kyiv at the end of January, and I will say we're very grateful for their contribution to Canada's diplomatic presence in Ukraine.
Okay, we're going to have to leave the conversation there for today. Thank you for your time, Minister.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.